Hello, guys. This is part 98 of ASP.NET video series. In this session, we will discuss about unlocking the locked user accounts using a web page. If a user repeatedly enters the wrong password, the accounts are locked to prevent hackers from guessing passwords and making any sorts of dictionary attacks. In part 94 of this video series, we have discussed about unlocking user accounts using a SQL Server agent job. The SQL Server agent job was scheduled to run every 30 minutes, and if it is going to unlock any account that is locked for over 24 hours. If you have not watched part 94, I would strongly encourage you to do so before continuing with this session. In this video, we will discuss about unlocking the locked user accounts using a web page that lists all the logged user accounts. From this page, the help desk agent can unlock an account by simply clicking on a button control. This is not as dangerous as running a manual update query, but still a manual process and may be inefficient. Let's look at this in an action. So obviously the first step in order to achieve this is to create a stored procedure. Let's to flip to SQL Server Management Agent Studio. Where is this SQL Server? Where is it? It is. So here I have this table user table, and if you look at this table, it has got this means if I run this query, it has got this is logged column. Here you can see it, which will basically tell us whether user account is logged or not. Okay, whether the user account is logged or not. Okay, at the moment, if you look at this sample data we have here, there are 4 user accounts that are logged. 4 user accounts that are logged. Okay, now I want to write a stored procedure that returns the username, that returns the username. I need to minimize a little bit. Okay, it returns username, the email of the person, the log date time, when was the account logged, that date time, that time, and then the most important thing is the numbers of hours. You know, this account is logged. For this account, is logged, and to get the number of hours and to get the numbers of hours, okay, I'm using date diff function. I'm using date diff function. To understand this function, it is very simple and straightforward. I want the difference between two dates, that is when I use date diff function. Okay, now date diff function is very helpful in the sense it can give you the date difference in either minutes, hours, days, etc. So now I want the difference between the current date and time, which I get using get date function, using get date function, and when the account was logged, I want the difference between those dates in number of hours, those days in number of hours. So I'm using this hours. So I'm using this hours. So I'm using this hour parameter here. This hour parameter here. So this function will return me the number of hours. Will return the numbers of hours. The account is logged. The account is logged. From this table, from this TBL user table, and I want these columns, and I want these columns, and I want these columns of information only for those rows which are logged. That is why I am using this where clause. Where is logged is equal to 1. Okay, so obviously if I execute this select statement, see that I get the username, email, log, date, time. Means if I execute this select statement, so what I get? I get the username, email, log, date, time, and hours elapsed. You know the number of hours since the account is logged, and if you look at two accounts, two and three, Jerry and Sarah, these accounts are logged up for over 24 hours. Okay, so let's go ahead and display this information on a web form using a grid view control. So let's flip to Visual Studio. So this is same project that we have been working within this video series. Now to this project I have added a web form called logged accounts.axpx. There is the logged accounts.axpx, and on this web form I just drag and drop the grid view control, and I have given this grid view control an ID of GV logged accounts. So I need to give it ID GV logged ACCOPNTS accounts. Let me check it from here. Where is the, yes, this one. Okay, I need to copy it from here and go back to Visual Studio and paste it here. Okay, so this is the ID which we have given here, GV logged accounts. So I basically now want to execute this stored procedure from .NET application. Okay, I basically want to run this stored procedure from .NET application and display data within the grid view. Okay, so the first thing I want to specify what columns I want to display within the grid view control. And the easiest way to do this is on the grid view click on this button control, click on this, click on edit column, so it is going to show all the columns that we can add to a grid view control. So if you look at the columns that I have means go to the Visual SQL Server Management Studio. I have username, email, log date time. I'm going to make these three columns bound columns. Now we have not spoken about grid view control in this video series. We will talking about that in later video session. Okay, so I'm going to add their first three column. So I'm going to add their first three column. Username, email, and log date time as bound columns to the grid view control, and to do that I am going to select bound column as the bound column. I have selected it and click add and click add. Now what? So that is the bound column. Now look at this, the column that is I am going to display within the grid view control you must specify two things. One is the header text. What do you want the header text of that column to be? Since we are displaying username, username, I'm going to specify the header text as username here. So I'm going to specify the username here in the header text. Okay. And then this column, and then this column, you know, that you are displaying in the grid view control. Where is it getting data from? Where it is getting data from? Now when I call from my .NET application, this stored procedure sp get all logged user accounts, this stored procedure is going to return data, you know, like this, with these columns: name, username, email, etc. Okay. So for the grid view control, username column in the grid view control, it gets its data from SQL Server column username, column in the grid view control. It gets its data from SQL Server column username. That's what we have to specify as the data field. So if you look at data, tab here, data tab here, the data field is username. Okay. So specify the username here. That is the name of the column. So two things we have to specify: the header text, and the data field. Header text and data field. I click OK. I click OK. Along the same line, I want to go ahead and add bound field for the rest of the columns: email and logged date time. Or email and logged date time. So I add another bound field. And the header text I'm going to specify as email. header text as email. I am going to specify header text as email, and the data field is again going to be email. So where is the data field? Here I am going to specify email again. That is the name of the column that the stored procedure returns. And along the same line, let me add another bound field, and that is to be logged date time. So let's call the header text. Let's call the header text as logged date and time. And what is the data field? Log date time. So that is the name of the column. Data field logged date time. Copy it from here, and data field is going to be log date time. So that is the name of the column. So let me copy this. I have copied it and pasted it as data field here. Finally, we have another column to display hours elapsed. Hours elapsed. Okay, now even this one. I'm going to use a bound field. So I am going to use another bound column for that. Bound column for that, and hours elapsed, and obviously the data field means go to the and bound field, and here what we need to do, specify hours elapsed. What was the column? Here we will copy it as from here, hours elapsed, and data field is also hours elapsed. So let's go ahead and copy that. We have already copy and pasted name of the column there, hours elapsed. That is the data field here. And finally, we also want to another column in the grid view control, because we want to display a button control where the help desk agent can click on that button to enable the account. And to do that, I am going to use a template field We have not again spoken about template field. In the grid view control, we will be talking about that in a later video session. So I'm going to add a template field. So I'm going to add a template field. Okay, and and I'm going to call the header text of this template field as enabled. So ENABLE, enabled. Enable, not enabled. Okay, so header text of this template field, as we call it as enable. Okay, now what's our template field with? When you use a template field in a when you use a template field in a grid view control, you will have complete control on what you place in that template field. We will talk about those template fields in a very great detail when we discuss about grid view control. For now, we have just specified a template field. The added text is enable. Okay, and that's it. I click OK. I click OK. Now look at this. It is displaying username, email, email, log date and time, all these columns, and in addition to that, it is saying column 0, column 1, column 2, etc. That is because if you look at this grid view control, there is the auto generated field. There is the auto generated fields, which is checked. Means if you go back, and you can see that there is the auto generated field which is checked. Okay, what does this mean? It is going to auto generate columns, and we don't want that, so I'm going to untick that because I have specified what columns, because I have specified what columns I want in my grid view control, and I click OK. Means I untick this auto generate fields and click OK. We should get rid of the other column that were there before. Okay, now within this enable template field, I want a button control. Okay, since this is a template column, in this grid view task pane, you can see that there is something called edit template link. So click on edit template link, and when I do that, I will be able to edit that column, enable column, which is column number 4. Okay, so item template. So what do you want in this template? I want a button control which the user can click to enable the logged user account. So I'm going to go to the toolbox and double click here. Oh, mistakenly. it should be not here. Okay, and double clicked here. So we get the button control here, and look at that, I get the button control. And you can specify the property of this button control just like how you would do for any other standard button control. Though it is in this template column, so I am going to specify the text of this button control as enable. Okay, so go to its property and enable. So I have specified the text of this button control as enable. Okay, at the moment that is the only property that is I am going to specify, and after I am done, that click on that smart grid view tasks button and look at that and template editing, and look at that and template editing. So I click that, look at that, I get the enable button for every column. Okay, so that is the change we have just specified the column that we want within the grid view control. Now we want to invoke the stored procedure and retrieve the data and display within the grid view control, which is simple edu.net code. So obviously to do that we have to import so what we need to do, so we need to import system.data, which is I have already imported. System.data.sql client I have already imported, and system.configuration. Okay, so those are the namespaces, and I am going to write a private method. So private, and I am going to call this void. Actually I have written it here in the notepad. I can copy it here. So let me copy this one. Okay, and paste it here. Okay, let me explain it to you. So I'm going to write a private method, so private, and I am going to call this void. Here it is void get data, and that is the name of the function. And what is this function is going to do? Simply execute the stored procedure. Retrieve the data, and bind it to the grid view control. So the first the first is to read the connection. So first is to read the connection string from connection string from web.config file, And to do that, we use the configuration manager class. I have used the configuration manager class. So configuration manager dot connection string, here it is, connection string of, we need to specify the name of the connection string. And if you remember, in web.config file we have a connection string with the name dbcs3. If you go to the connect, so here it is, the name of the connection string dbcs3. Okay, so let me take that connection string. I have already specified this connection string here and passes it to this connection string property dot connection string, and pass it to this connection string property dot connection string. So we get the connection string. Next we are using statement. Next we are using statement and create a SQL connection object. So SQL connection con is equal to new SQL connection, and we specify the connection string. We specify the connection string here, property. Okay, so since we are using the block here, so since we are using this using block here, let me power up my laptop battery. So we are using block here. The connection object will be closed immediately after the scope of the using block is over. Okay, so we have the SQL connection object. We have the SQL connection object. The next one is the SQL command object. SQL command object. So SQL command cmd is equal to SQL command is equal to new SQL command, and we want to execute a stored procedure. So the name of the stored procedure is sp get all logged user accounts. sp get all logged user account. So I am going to pass in the name of the stored procedure and the next property that you have to specify, and so I pass in this here in the name of the stored procedure, and the next property that you have to specify is the connection object. Next property is the connection object, using which we want to execute the stored procedure. So I specified that, and since this is a stored procedure, we have to specify the command type. We have to specify the command type. So command cmd dot command type is equal to command type dot stored procedure, and now this stored procedure does accept any parameter. So this stored procedure does accept any parameter? No. So we don't have to pass any input parameter to the stored procedure. All we have to do now is open the connection. All we need, all we have to do now is open the connection and execute the stored procedure. Okay, execute the stored procedure here. Execute the stored procedure and look at this. This stored procedure is actually, and look at this. This stored procedure is actually returning rows, username, email, log date, time of data, rows of these rows data, returning these rows data of these rows data. So I use execute reader. So I use execute reader method of the command object. So execute reader, and then whatever is returned is going to set that as a data source. So yes, what is returned is, so then whatever it returns, so whatever it returns, I am going to set that as a data source for our grid view control. So grid view logged accounts dot data source. So grid view logged accounts dot data source is equal to command dot execute reader, and finally call the data bind, and that is it. That's it. We don't have to close the connection because we are using the using block there. That's it. So this method will actually execute the stored procedure, retrieve the data. So this method actually execute the stored procedure, retrieve the data and bind it to grid view control. And what do I want to do when the web form loads up? If not is post back, if not is post back, so if this is the initial get request, if not is post back, so if this is the initial get request, I want to call this get data method. Okay, I want to call this get data method. Okay, so with this, if I go ahead and run this now, we should be able to execute the stored procedure and get the information about all the logged accounts and displayed. Obviously we are using form authentications. Means if I run this, obviously we are using form authentication here, so I am not able to get to that page directly unless until I log in. So let me provide the login information. test and password. Oh my god, it's taking me to change password, but I don't want to do it. What happened to it? There is something wrong. I have specified it. If I run it, it is taking me to login.axpx page. Let me check. Okay, what happened to it? So test and next. It is redirecting me to that page, but I need to go to that page. So what is happened to it? Now it is going to take me to that page. Okay, right. Okay, now I'll type test and the password is going to be okay. Now logging. Look at it. So logging and look at it, I get the exact same information that the stored procedure returns. In addition to that, we have this button. With that, we have this button, and if you look at the way these button behaving now, look at this button behaving now, is basically enabled for every this button is enabled for every, basically enabled for every logged account. Now let's say the organization policy is that you cannot unlock an account if it has not been logged for over 24 hours. Then enable button should be disabled, which means the help desk agent cannot enable an account that is not logged for over 24 hours. Okay, so we want to disable the button in those cases. How do we do that? Now, how do we enable a button? if you want to disable a button, every button has got a property called enabled property. All you need to do is, if I go to the source here, I have this button control. I have this button control. So I can simply set enable is equal to false. So e false here, but I set enable is equal to false here. Then what is going to happen for every row within grid view control, the button will be disabled. So obviously now if I go ahead and run this, means save the changes, and run this, and again here you can see the URL. It is redirecting me to this login page. Okay, so test. Okay, so look at here. So as you might expect, when the grid view control renders, every button will be disabled. Every button will be disabled. So let me, and we don't want that behaviors, we want to programmatically inspect the value of this hours elapsed, and if it is over 24 hours, only then we want to disable this button, otherwise keep it enable. So hard coding the value like this within the HTML source. So go back to the here and hard coding the value like this within the HTML source is not going to work for us. Okay, hard coding the value like this within the HTML source is not going to work for us. We have to dynamically determine the enable property. And how do we do that? It is very simple to do it. Okay, now first of all, let's understand the logic on how we want to do it. So we have this column. Which is coming from database hours elapsed, which is coming from database hours elapsed. That is the name of the column, which contains the number of hours. The account is logged. The account is logged if that hour is greater than 24. Okay, then have that enable, then have that enable. Otherwise, disable it. So what is I'm going to do here is enabled is equal to is equal to here, instead of hard coding the value here, I am going to use this syntax angular means angular percentage and hash. So what is that going to do? Now we can specify the data binding syntax here. So I am going to use eval, that is function, eval, that is function. And then if you look at the column that is giving up the that is giving us the number of hours, if you look at the column that is giving us the number of hours, okay, column that is giving us the, if you look at the column that is giving us the number of hours, since the account is logged, hours elapsed. So I want the value from this column, so I am taking the value from that column, hours elapsed. Okay, if that value, and by the way, you have to use a single quote here. By the way, you have to use a single quote here, means here. So eval, and what I need to do, hours elapsed. Okay, copy it. So okay, if that value, and by the way, you have to use a single quote, we have used that, so let's use a single quote for that. So I get that hours elapsed now. Okay, and I want to convert that to an integer, because number of hour is integer. So I'm going to say convert to int 32. So I'm going to say convert dot to int 32. So after I convert this value to an integer, and I'm using a greater than symbol. So I'm going to use a greater than symbol. greater than symbol 24. So the value from this column, after you convert that to an integer, if that is over 24 hours, if that expression returns, expression if that expression return true, then enable will be true. Otherwise, if that returns false, enabled will be false, which means the button will be disabled. Okay, so that's it. You know, that is you know that is how we are dynamically determining determining if we want to enable or disable, if we want to enable or disable that button. So let me go ahead and run the page with this change, and when the user logging, look at that. Now this button means, again, what you need to do, close it and run this, save the changes, run this. So that is the username. So look at that. Now this button, now these buttons are disabled, this button and this button, these buttons are disabled, but the buttons which were the hours are greater than 24, but the buttons which were the hours are greater than 24 are basically enabled, are basically enabled, and the user can click these button, and user can click these button to basically enable those accounts. But now when I click this button, nothing will happen. But now I click this button, nothing will happen, because we have not implemented that yet. We will do that in the next video sessions. Another problem with this page is that any user who is logged in your machine, I mean who is logged into this application, can basically access this page. We don't want that to be happening. We only want to allow a specific user. For example, let's say I want only the administrator. I want only the administrator. Let's say I want only the administrator. For example, let's say within this application test user, within this application test user, you know, this test user is the administrator, and only he should be able to access. Anybody else who is trying to access this page, maybe we want to redirect him to an access denied page. Okay, because that is the secure page. We don't want access to everybody within the application. So how can I prevent other user from accessing this page? There are several ways. Okay, so one way is one way is you can actually move this logged account page to another folder, maybe to an admin folder, and you have another web.config file there, and you can have an authorization element there, which allow access only to test user, and then deny access to everybody else. That is one way. Another way, if you want do it programmatically in the page load event, you can basically check. Okay, so if it is not a post back event, so if it is not a post back event, I mean it if it is if it is if it is not a post back, if user dot identity, so user dot identity, if user dot identity dot name, so so if user dot identity, so user dot identity will give the ID of the person who is logged in. If the name which returns the username logged in, or authenticated user, or authenticated username dot to lower. So I am comparing that to a specific username. If that user is test user, that is the username. Okay, because if you look at the user here, username here test, username here test. If he is a test user, then allow page loading, get a data, and all that else. Test allow that all. Else. So if it is not again I am repeating it here. If it is not a post back, if user dot identity dot name, which will give ID of the person who is logged in. Okay, if he is a test user, then allow page loading, get data, and all that. Else, what we want to do, we want to redirect him to an access denied page. I have already added access denied page. So what we need to do, response redirect. Dot redirect to this page. So copy that and go to the logged account and paste it here. What happened to it? I did not copy it here. So you have to do like this. Copy it and paste it here. Okay. Deny access denied .axpx. And all I have on this page, very simple and straightforward HTML. If you go to the very simple HTML, that is the page. So I want to redirect the user to that particular page. So I have already pasted here this page, access denied, response dot redirect to that page. Okay, so now if we go ahead and run this, since I am logged in as test, right now I will be able to access that page because we set for test user allow this. But then if I close all these windows, if I close all these windows, let run this application once again. Save the changes first. Run this. Logged account. I'm going to logging as John. So I'm going to logging as John G. And the password so password is this. I will log in. Look at that. The return URL is logged accounts.axpx. Access denied. Access denied .axpx. After I log in, I will try to go to logged account, but look at what is going to happen. It is redirecting me to access denied. Redirecting me to access denied. Why? Because user dot identity name, because user dot identity dot name will return my logged in username. In this case, John and John is not allowed to to this page. John is not allowed to this page, access to this page. So on the page load, we are redirecting him to access denied.axpx. Not only him, any other user apart from test user. That is why all user that is why all a user, if they try to access this page, they will get access denied page as response. But if test user login, he will be able to access the page. In the next video, we will discuss about how to enable, the implementing the enable button. In this video, we have just seen how to display the data about logged user account. But in the next video, the help desk agent will be able to enable user accounts by clicking on that enable button. That's it for today. Thanks you for listening. Have a great day. Okay, let me close it now. Why the key is not working here? Okay, let me to do it here. What is happening to it? My OBS is not getting